Bucketeers. Good to see you all this morning. I'm Joanne Bundy, and the Planning Committee joins me in welcoming you to the fourth and last class of Dr. J.R. Paulson's course on Why Can't We All Get Along. We're starting a few minutes early this morning because J.R. would like to have as much time as he could get. No surprise there. I have a couple of announcements for you. First, you will notice that you have the suggestion evaluation form on your chairs. It isn't required, but if there's something that you would like the Planning Committee to know, we welcome your suggestions. So please fill that out if you're so inclined, and you can leave it on the table in the hall when you're finished. Next week begins our variety pack, and I've asked George Drake to give you a little preview on it. George Drake.
Thanks, Joanne. You probably know that there's this infamous group in this town, all male, called Fortnightly. It's a group of a combination of college and town folks. It's existed since the year 1903, so it's over 100 years old. I personally think it was Edward Steiner who got it started in this community. And what we do is we read papers to or at each other every other week, and the members are either hosts or presenters in a particular year. Some of you in this room are members of that group. And the Planning Committee, which, had heard rumors about this group and the interesting papers that are presented, decided that we would include some of those papers in our variety pack. Now, I hasten to assure you that we have told presenters they're not to read a paper to you. They're to, and usually the paper's about 20 or 25 minutes, and then there's a very interesting discussion in the group that follows. So they're going to expand on what they included in their papers, and of course with ample, we think, ample time for discussion. So they're going to take place in the rest of November, and then into the early part of December. And I'm going to, so you've seen the announcement in the paper, but let me indicate that the first of these next week will be Bill Menner, and he did a very interesting paper on Herbert Hoover, but not Herbert Hoover the president, Herbert Hoover the great sort of engineer, feeder of Europe after World War I, etc. All of the things that Hoover did besides being president of the United States. Then Monty Redenius, sitting right out there, a faithful bucketeer, did a very interesting paper on the pipe organ. As it happened, Monty grew up in Lake City, Iowa, and guess what? The Dobson Organ Manufacturing Company is in Lake City, and he'll tell us they make organs all over, provide them all over the world. Then Andy Hamilton, not a bucketeer because he's very, very busy at the college all the time, coach, etc., did a very, very interesting paper on the black athlete, which grew out of the tutorial that he taught at Grinnell College. So that'll be the last one in November. Then the one in December, sitting right out there, Sig Barber. I'll never forget this paper. It was one of those papers that sort of raised me out of my seat. It was on the Spanish flu in 1918. I mean, here I am, an historian, a European historian, and I was pretty ignorant of this. My own view after hearing that paper is that's probably what stopped World War I. Too many people were dying of the flu to continue the war. Some of you had family members who were affected by the Spanish flu. Anyway, it's a very interesting paper, and we'll have Sig on that. We'll finish the variety pack. Now, if you're not registered, you can do so by email with Jim, or sign up in person at the table out in the hall. Tuition for this variety pack will be $15. And then Joanne said I should introduce JR. All of you here know JR. You're eagerly awaiting the conclusion of why we can't get along. JR.
Okay, all of you, thank you for coming, and to the folks on YouTube. This is class 4. I'd like to have about 5 more on this topic.
Joanne, he's not on.
You're not on.
Thank you.
How's that in the back?
Mike?
Yeah.
So?
Yeah.
Okay. So welcome all, and those of you on YouTube. As I said, I'd like to have 4 more classes to do this, but I've been told I need to wind up today. So class 4, putting it all together. From what we've learned, how can we disagree and discuss these important topics civilly? Disclaimer, no live chickens were hurt or injured in the first class morality thought experiment. It was my fault. The chicken was already dead. I had some people after that came up and said, well, the chicken was harmed, and that's abuse of animals, and I wanted to take that off and just clarify that. Nice poster. Reminiscent of World War II posters, done in the same style. Anybody believe this is the case today?
Yeah.
So the themes, we are really homo duplex. We're 90% chimps, selfish, and about 10% bees, groupish, and social. We've used that theme before. Groupishness trumps selfishness, which is surprising because we all think selfishness trumps everything else, and or reason in many instances. Just to start by these, so these are important points. We've been shaped by both genetic and social evolution, and these have been greatly accelerating over the last dozen or so millennia. We are really, when you think about it, not very removed from the jungle or forest, either genetically or socially. So when you think about that, we're skating on pretty thin social ice at this time. And it doesn't take much to send us back. So the outline for this class is 1, what binds us. 2, what blinds us. And what we can do to get along better. That which binds us. Although most of us go along in our mundane, daily world working in a generally selfish paradigm, at times we can rise above ourselves and be part of a greater whole. Although we are Lacanian, and I think I proved that to you in earlier classes, we can, under the right conditions, be one for all and all for one. After all, it was mainly through this mechanism that we conquered our fellow homos and came to dominate the planet. Hate causes trigger the hive switch. The hive switch is an adaptation for making groups more cohesive and therefore more successful in competing with other groups. It evolved. Triggers for the hive switch. Some things can be congregation, muscular bonding, awe of nature, certain hallucinogenic drugs, raves, and religions of all types, from Islam to football to the Tea Party. Emile Durkheim was a French sociologist, philosopher, and psychologist. He's often considered the father of sociology. He lived from about 1858 to 1917. Congregation. Durkheim said, the very act of congregating is an exceptionally powerful stimulant. Once individuals are gathered together, a sort of electricity is generated from their closeness and quickly launches them to an extraordinary height of exaltation. Agree with that? Thank you. When I act under the influence of the second, the inner social, I'm simply part of a whole, whose actions I follow and whose influence I am subject to. Muscular bonding. Military drilling. What's that have to do? Group dancing, parades, and spectacles. These guys are out drilling. Any of you have been in the military or other organizations know how boring and repetitive it is. Or there's something going on. Words are inadequate to describe the emotion aroused by the prolonged movement in unison that drilling involved. A sense of pervasive well-being is what I recall, more specifically a strange sense of personal enlargement. A sort of swelling out, become bigger than life, thanks to participation in collective ritual. So there's something going on, drilling with all these people doing exactly the same thing. Of course, Hitler used that to T, both for the people being involved and the people watching. All get caught up in that spectacle. And Red Square, same thing, marching in Red Square. And of course now, North Korea, same psychology. It's a type of brainwashing of some of the people and the men. Being a part of this has an effect that's much different than a lot of people who haven't been in that would imagine. Goes way back to Macedonians. This is Alexander the Great had this phalanx. All these soldiers organized into the Macedonian phalanx, 256 men. How would you like to come up on this? These poles are 18 feet long. So again, in unity versus having just an army of 256 men. But if you got them in formation, you got them doing this, and you got them all moving in sequence, you are more awesome than the sum of your parts. Does that make sense? Yes. So who's going to conquer that, run into that? Well, Alexander used his dad's strategy. He's the one who devised it. King Philip II, and conquered a lot of the Persian Empire. Awe of nature. Standing on the bare ground, my head bathed by the blithe air, and uplifted into infinite space, all mean egotism vanishes. I become a transparent eyeball. I am nothing. I see all. The currents of the universal being circulate through me. I am part of the particle of God. Emerson, 1830. Nature is a portal to the sacred me, founder of American transcendentalism. So this act of being in nature gets him out of his little selfish self. Draconian hallucinogens. Aztec mushroom eater, about to be carried away to the realm of the sacred. In most primitive tribes, as part of their rituals, people, either the witch doctor and or the other people are given drugs as part of some of the ceremonies. And those drugs are usually hallucinogenic, and all the cultures have them. And you can see the god here tapping him on the shoulder, and these are the mushrooms. All of a sudden, I felt sort of drawn out into infinity. And all of a sudden, I had lost all touch with my mind. I felt I was caught up in the vastness of creation. We took such an infinitesimal amount of psilocybin, and yet it connected me to infinity. Boston divinity student in a psychology experiment in the 60s. So something's going on here, out of here, connecting us to the sacred. I came along this in the internet, interesting. New York banker goes to Mexico's mountains to participate in age-old rituals. Indians who choose strange growths that produce visions. This is a banker in the 50s, and he makes his account of that. Very interesting. Raves. I've never been to a rave, but I guess when you see it, it's a pretty awesome thing. There's a whole bunch of young people dancing to pounding music with laser light shows, and probably most of them are taking some type of drug, ecstasy or some of these club drugs. And what's going on there is something that we're going to describe. Most tribal groups can trigger this high. What's a tribe? Well, obviously primitive tribes like this. But Pope Francis, St. Patrick's Cathedral, does that turn on a hive switch? Does that get people part of the community, out of your own self? Those of you Hawkeye fans would get hived up if you see this. They actually look like bees. Now that I think of it. For me, if I start hearing Hail to the Victors, my hive switch goes on. If you're in Michigan, you hear the Victors, it automatically transforms you into another place in another. And not to be left out, you Packer fans, you know who you are, Green Bay. But look at this shot. Besides just the Packers and your football hive, there's loyalty, there's sacredness, there's the American flag. Look at all the people. How many people had to get together to do that, to get this pattern? That's pretty impressive. That's like bees in a hive. Everybody's going and doing their thing. It's not the little selfish me, well, I don't want to sit there, I'm not going to wear that color, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that. We'll all go together, and this is the effect. Music, whether it's orchestra or choral, should give those of you that participate that feeling of something bigger than yourself. Even if you're in plays, working with the other people, the dynamic, the sum is greater than the parts. What then is the biology behind this hive switch? As you would expect, it's composed of neurons, hormones, and neurotransmitters. The hormone is oxytocin. It's responsible for uterine contractions and milk letdown. It's a powerful motivator to touch and care for one's children. Have a good evolutionary basis? You betcha. And they've done experiments with animals where they'll take a certain mammal, like a cat, give it some oxytocin, and then they'll bring baby mice in. And the cat will nurse the baby mice. And you go, what's wrong with this picture? Oxytocin, the bonding, the motherly type thing. Male brains, we've got some too. Also been modified by evolution to be sensitive to its secretion. Daddies that protect the nest and the mama, that has evolutionary advantage. So we've got it programmed into us. If you squirt oxytocin into someone's nose, they become more trusting, even of strangers. Conversely, people who behave trustingly cause oxytocin levels to increase in the partner trusted. So you can bring about it in other people. Your brain secretes more oxytocin when you have had intimate contact with another, even if it's only a back rub. Oxytocin levels rise when people watch videos of others suffering, at least among those who report feelings of empathy. If you're a sociopath, it doesn't bother you to see other people suffer, but most people causes that to happen. However, before you spray it into the halls of Congress, which was I thought, well, let's just get some of this. Put it in the air vents in there. It'll be a kumbaya session. But in an experiment, Dutch men got a spray of oxytocin versus placebo before playing games with others. The oxytocin group made less selfish decisions, but they only cared more about helping their group. So the Democrats are only going to help the Democrats, and the Republicans are only going to help the Republicans. It ain't going to work, folks, sorry. And they show no concern for improving the outcomes of men in the other groups. You know, good thought. At least you know what's going on. Oxytocin simply makes people love their in-group more. These systems seem to evolve to sustain and facilitate with in-group cooperation and coordination. The tighter your group is, the likely it's going to do against other groups. Second thing, called mirror neurons. Discovered in the 1980s in macaque monkeys and later confirmed in humans. Actions seen in another primate or person cause neurons to fire in the observer's brain even though he or she is not directly experiencing the event. So when I take this glass and are lifting it up here, it's triggering in your neurons a priming for you to almost get ready to do the same. It understands my intention. I'm getting water. It's firing off in you. And we discovered this accidentally. These neurons in humans, however, have a much stronger connection versus the monkeys to the limbic system, or the emotional related areas of the brain. Just seeing someone else smile activates neurons in your brain. Makes you happier and more likely to smile back, doesn't it? Mary Lou's smiling right back at me. Humans feel each other's pain and joy to a much greater extent than any other primate. We've got this higher, more highly developed. However, like the oxytocin system, this mirror system is more selective. Neuroscientist Tanya Singer had subjects play an economic game with strangers, one of whom played nicely and the other played selfishly. In the second part of the experiment, subject brains were scanned while they're under functional MRIs, while mild shocks were delivered randomly to the visible hand, so I can see this other person getting shocked. of the nice or the selfish player? What do you think is going to go off in your brain? Results. Subjects' brains responded in the same way when the nice player received a shock as when they themselves were shocked. So when Clinton said, "I feel your pain," we can actually do this. However, when the selfish player got a shock, people showed less empathy, and some even showed neural evidence of pleasure. This is neurology, folks. This is not morality. This is what's going on in a functional MRI in people's brains when different things happen. I'd say that's kind of hardwired in. As Haidt summarized, we are conditioned hive creatures. We are more likely to mirror and then empathize with others when they have conformed to our moral matrix and when they violate it. Neuro, psychological, hormonal stuff going on here on this "why can't we get along?" What happens if the slider switch is turned up too high? True Believer, I read it for the 4th time this last weekend. Eric Hoffer talks about all the mass movements from Christianity, communism, Nazism, and how they attract people's minds. So who's a true believer? He's a guilt-ridden hitchhiker who thumbs a ride on every cause from Christianity to communism. He's a fanatic, being a Stalin or Christ, doesn't make much difference, to worship and die for. He's the mortal enemy of things as they are. They don't like the status quo. Insists on sacrificing himself for a dream impossible to attain. He is today everywhere on the march. Racist soldiers would be a good example today. In every act, however trivial, the individual must by some ritual associate himself with the congregation, the tribe, the party, etc. Eric Hoffer, page 61. So even little things, you've got to prove your worth to your tribe or your group. Not just the big things, the little things, because they are symbolic. So if you have a religious belief and someone says, well, this dogma is this little part, that doesn't mean much, that's not a major thing. Well, yes, it does, because it signifies doubt of the bigger system. It is the true believer's ability to shut his eyes and stop his ears to facts that do not deserve to be either seen or heard, which is the source of his unequaled fortitude and constancy. Okay, let's go on to the war on science. We brought this up. Climate change doesn't exist. Evolution never happened. Moon landing was fake. Vaccinations can lead to autism. Genetically modified food is evil. Why don't people believe science? Any scientists in here? Good. I think we can answer that question now. Opinion differences between public and scientists. And as you see, there's some pretty good gaps here. Biomedical sciences. Is it safe to eat genetically modified foods? American Association, is association or academy? Association. American Association for the Advancement of Science. That's right. Thank you, Burl. American Association for the Advancement of Science. International, huge. That's the big group of science. Guys, look, 88% say it's okay, but look what the people believe. Huge gap. Animals in research. Safe to eat foods grown with pesticides. Humans have evolved over time. 98% of scientists in the group, only 65% of lay folks. Childhood vaccines such as MMR should be required. Again, difference. Climate change is mostly due to human activity. 87%. Liz Queetham gave a talk 2 weeks ago on global warming and climate change. She said it's over 90% now of scientists seem on board. But look what everybody else is at. 50%. Half the people go, what? Climate change? And it's other things about offshore drilling or whatever, but we won't go into those. Okay, so what's your logical answer? scientists' perspective, limited public knowledge about science is a major problem. So you ask all these scientists, and they say, is it a major or minor problem for science in general? The public doesn't know much about science, so it's a major problem. So 84% of all these scientists says it's a major problem. It's science education. So we just get out there and educate. But what do you folks know about our class so far? Is that going to cut it? It ain't going to work. The solution is just to educate the public more about science, right? That's why you're in this class. Dan Cahan of Yale University asked 1,540 Americans about this exact question. They were asked to rate the threat of climate change on a scale from 0 to 10. Then he scaled their science literacy. He found that higher literacy was associated with stronger views at both ends of the spectrum. Science literacy promoted polarization on climate, not consensus. But you know that, don't you? You have your belief, you look at the evidence, you change it to the belief that you already have. So giving more science education and facts is not going to change them. Some people it will, but some of them it's just going to reinforce their already opinion. According to Cahan, that's because people tend to use scientific knowledge to reinforce beliefs they've already been shaped by their worldview. Remember I told you the bias? What's it called? Confirmation bias. Must I believe it? Can I believe it? Basically, there are two worldviews on climate change. One would go something like this. They have a mindset that's usually suspicious of industry and apt to think it's up to something dangerous that calls for government regulation. Protection of the environment is sacred. Individualistic. Have a mindset that respects leaders of industry, doesn't like the government interfering in their affairs, and is fearful and suspicious of some tax regulation or emissions. So people tend to be in one of these two camps. So you're going to look at the same facts and things and like go one way or the other, depending what camp you're in. In the U.S., climate change has now become one of the litmus tests that identifies you as belonging to one of these antagonistic tribes. We will do nothing that jeopardizes our membership in this tribe. I'm just a messenger. Science appeals to our rational brain, but our beliefs are motivated by what? Largely by emotion. And that's the biggest motivator in remaining tight with our peers. National Geographic. So that's why science people believe that. It's not emotional, it's not our belief system. Therefore, throwing out more facts at them doesn't help. What's wrong or right with this picture? Anybody catch the problem? What's the problem? It's Adam and Eve. They're prehistoric people, but what? There's a dinosaur in there. Well, what's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that if you're a creationist. If you believe that dinosaurs and people lived on the earth at different times, it's wrong. You got a problem. So I said right or wrong depends on what? What is your... Now, what determines that? Well, those of you remember last week, Mr. Trump made a comment about Seventh-day Adventists, Dr. Paulson. And many Adventists also believe the Bible offers a historical, accurate view of ancient times, which is why Carson, for instance, ascribes to creationalism, the idea that God created the world in 6 days. So Carson believes this. He's no dummy, he's a neurosurgeon. And trust me, to be a neurosurgeon, you gotta be smart. You gotta have a lot of education. Your brain's gotta work pretty well to get that. But, on the other hand, you see that the smartest guy is probably running the whole thing. But, another look at the binding of religion. As we've seen, gods and religions are group-level adaptations for producing cohesiveness and trust. The new atheists felt that religion is the root of most of the evils in the world. Remember we talked about that. They and many of you out there think it's all about beliefs. And if it's irrational to you, it's stupid to believe. However, you should have seen by now that the new atheist criticism of religion are one-sided and based on the irrationality of their beliefs and not their behaviors. What then are some of the positive behavioral aspects of religion? Besides drawing and binding the religious community together, what does it do for everybody else? Okay, people go off to church and do that. Well, studies of charitable giving in the United States show that people in the least religious fifth of the population give just 1.5% of their money to charity. Those in the most religious fifth give almost 5 times, or a whopping 7% of their income to charity. Religiousness was based on church attendance, not on belief. How often the people are going to church, how much they're going to give to charity. In other studies, religious folks do far more volunteer work than secular folks do. When it comes to trust, religious people are believed to be more trusted by others, and therefore are, if you believe somebody's more trustworthy than they are, which has major implications for trade, commerce, and the obeying of laws. In medieval times, if you were a Muslim and you made a trade, you shook hands. That was binding. You didn't need any contract law. Allah was watching you. He knew if you were going to break your oath or contract. You didn't need anything in paper writing. When you said something was going to happen, you did it. And if you dealt with somebody who was a devout Muslim, enough said. If they say, well, I'm an atheist, and then what are you going to put for collateral for that? You see the difference? While it's true that religious people tend to give more to their own faith, yeah, they give a lot to their own church and faith. But they also outperform secular people in gifts to non-religious organizations and causes such as the American Cancer Society and others. So yeah, they give a lot to their churches and stuff, but they also give more to others. Besides spending a lot of time in service to their churches and synagogues, religious folks spend more time serving in neighborhood and civic associations. Political scientists Campbell and Putnam, in their book, American Grace, How Religion Divided and United Us, summarizes their findings. By many different measures, religiosity or religiously observant Americans are better neighbors and better citizens than secular Americans. They're more generous with their time and money, especially in helping the needy, and they are more active in community life. To find out why, Putnam and Campbell included a long list of questions about religious beliefs. Well, it's got to be something in their religion, doesn't it? So, do you believe in hell? You're going to get punished after. That's what's driving them. Do you believe in heaven? Oh, if I'm a nice person and give to the poor, I'm going to be welcomed into heaven. Do you believe we'll all be called before God to answer for our sins on Judgment Day? You read the Quran, that's over and over and over and over again. I'll come to judgment. So what you do, and Islam is very specific on how much you give. And Allah knows how much you give. He's keeping the accounting up there. So there's no questions asked. How often do you pray? How often do you read Holy Scripture? And many others. Okay, what do you think they find? From what we said before. They found these beliefs mattered very little. Whether you believe in hell, whether you pray daily, whether you were Catholic, a Mormon, Protestant, or Jew, none of these things correlated with the generosity. So, it's not on what people's beliefs are. Something's going on with the group, the church, the cohesive tribe. The only thing that was reliable and powerfully associated with the moral benefit of religion was how enmeshed people were in relationships with their co-religionists. In rejecting the new atheist emphasis on beliefs, they go on to say, it is religious belongingness that matters for neighborliness, not religious believing. Should put a star by that. And finally, is there any health value to religiosity? From my point of view, the answer is yes. I gave this at another talk, and I actually organized, we had a Rosenfeld Symposium 15 or 20 years ago where we brought Harold Koenig from Duke, who wrote this book, The Healing Power of Faith. Science explores medicine's last great frontier. Depression, alcoholism, suicide, heart attacks, how long you recover from a hip surgery. These are all things that are correlated with faith and religiosity. Again, not the belief. So when they do studies in Israel, and secular or non, in the religious kibutzes, you find these differences. So everything else is, well, it's culturally different. No, we take culture. So there's something going on here. And what about those Seventh-day Adventists again, who believe that their body is an embodiment of God and a temple of the Holy Spirit, and therefore should be treated as sacred? Gee, remember the Sacred Foundation? If you believe your body is sacred, you're going to do things very differently than if you don't. So if you're in the paradigm of religiosity, very different than individualistic. Loma Linda, California, this is from this year. Most of our health problems are said to be the result of three things. Bad food choices, yep. Inactivity, yep. And unmanaged stress, yep. Those are the three killers that do most people in. Therefore, it's no surprise that Seventh-day Adventists live an average of 10 years longer. 10 years, not a few days, than other Americans. Because they don't do that. They look at their body the way it should be looked at, they think. Behavioral genetics in God. We talked about the importance of some genes being programmed in. Different twin studies in Minnesota, 53, Australian, 3,800. That's a lot of twins. English twin studies. Conclusion, genetics accounts for about 55% of the variance in religious attitudes. 39% non-shared environment, 5% non-assigned. Only about 3% was attributed to the shared family environment. Cultural transmission by parental teaching. And after the break, I'll tell you what you guys, how you ended up on that. Because we asked you your origin family and where you are now. According to this, it wouldn't be too highly correlated. Of course, genes do not determine which religions one chooses, but belief in supernatural agents, combined with personality traits, respect for authority and tradition, are driven by factors above. I like to analyze why are people in certain religions and others not, either in religions or in different ones. And it has to do with the stuff we talked about with the politics, what your brain's like. If you're kind of an authoritarian type person who wants stuff told to you, this is the way we do stuff, you can be attracted to this. If you're pretty free-flowing, the I Ching sounds awful good to you, or Zen. You go like, oh, what does that mean, per se? And we'll come back to that, because I think it's important. I think to a large degree this is determined by the relative distribution of the moral foundation. How high are you on sanctity? How high in authority? No, I'm over here in the independent thing. I don't mind getting any pope in the way between me and God. See how it's going to, people are going to self-select out. It's not just how you were raised. And I got 5 more minutes until part 2, that which blinds us. There are a number of other things, both internal and external, that tend to blind us so we don't see things. We need to be aware of egocentric thinking, sociocentric thinking, the cognitive biases, especially the confirmation bias and the attribution bias. Egocentric thinking, I didn't give you a handout on this. It's true because I believe it. It's true because we believe it. It's true because I want to believe it. It's true because I've always believed it. It's true because my selfish interest would believe it. For example, I always wanted to believe, for some reason, in the innocence and peaceful life of the Plains Indians, before those violent, big, bad white men came. Then we read for book club, Empire of the Summer Moon. And all of a sudden, my little, what I wanted to believe in myths about the nice Indians were changed. Forever. I gave you this handout, sociocentric thinking, just underlining the uncritical tendency to place one's culture, nation, our country, United States, right or wrong, above, and a religion above all others. Just be aware that it's going on. Darwin struggled with this. He said, understood the human predilection for reaffirming the status quo. In his autobiography, he said, quote, he noted how quickly he forgot any facts that seemed to contradict his theories. Gee. He therefore made it a golden rule to write this information down so he wouldn't overlook it or forget it. How many of us have that strength of fortitude to write this stuff down that doesn't go along with what we want? Most social institutions, most notably those in religion, politics, and economics, reward belief in the doctrines of the faith or party ideology and punish those who challenge the authority of the leaders and discourage uncertainty and especially skepticism. Correct? Attribution bias, tendency to attribute different causes for our own beliefs and actions than that of others. I went over this in the truth class. It can be either situational or dispositional. Situational, we identify the cause of someone else's belief or behavior in the environment. Her success is because, she was just lucky. Or circumstance, she was born into a rich family, and she had connections, or because, or whatever. However, Shermer and others, 10,000, that's a pretty good sample of Americans, essay question, not just to check the box, of why they believe in God and why others don't, or why others believe in God. So, same question. I believe in God, others believe in God. This study clearly demonstrated the intellectual and emotional attribution biases. What would you predict? The top two reasons that people gave for why they believe in God were the good design of the universe and the experience of God in everyday life. However, when asked why others believed, these answers dropped to sixth and third place. Others believe in God because that belief is comforting. It's just comforting to them. Because of their fear of death. Okay? What we attribute to others, but not to ourselves. That's a bias, attribution bias. We see our own beliefs as being rational, rationally motivated. But see others, you're just emotionally driven. You're just doing that. You're just going to church because it's just emotion. I'm real intellectual and I'm smart. I wouldn't do that. One more, then we'll go to break. What do liberals and conservatives think each others think? Good question. So, Haight, Graham, these guys asked 2,000 Americans to fill out the same questionnaire you did. Third of the time, they said, fill it out just normally the way you do. Next time, here's another one. I want you to fill out how you think a typical liberal would fill it out. And what do you think a liberal would fill out? And then a third of the time, say, fill it out as a typical conservative would respond. Pretty clever, isn't it? So it's like the religion question, why do you believe in God? So now you're asking conservatives, well, what do you think they're going to find? The results were clear and consistent, not wishy-washy. Moderates and conservatives were the most accurate in their predictions, whether they were pretending to be liberals or conservatives. So they had a better perception of the other people. Liberals were the least accurate. And you know who you are in this room because I got all your questionnaires back. Especially those who would describe themselves as very liberal. Truth is a lie repeated with frequency and consistency. We love it. Fox News. Could have made another slide. Or MSNBC. So if you're just watching MSNBC, and you're saying, the Fox guys, you're kind of, think about it. Okay, I think we'll leave that there, and then after the break, we're going to talk about Manichean thinking. Doesn't that sound exciting? So, is he great?
Thank you for taking your chairs, ladies and gentlemen. We just started the half of JR's class. I want to remind you again that if you do fill out the evaluation and suggestion form, to put it on the table in the hall as you leave. And now back to JR.
Okay, thank you. Mike mentioned to me to remind you that there's a great display at the Science Center of Iowa. I saw it yesterday. It's on race. They have a whole permanent display. They're going to have it for a couple months. It's an interaction thing about how race evolved and how most of our genes are still in southern Africa. That's where the most genetic variability is. And it really dovetails nicely in what we're talking about. It's saying all the races were really not different. So all this stuff, the race is basically a human construct. And as a doctor, I know that. Because when I open you up, I don't care what race you are, you all look the same. You know. So, I was corrected on pronunciation. Manichean thinking. So Mani was a prophet in Persia back in a couple hundred years after death of Christ. He founded the Gnostic religion, or one of them, there was many of them, based on a rigid dualism of good and evil. I think that Western dualism figures highly into our difficulty in getting along. There are a lot of polar opposites. Good, bad, right, wrong, true, false, my side, my tribe, your tribe, foreign, domestic, equals no compromise. It was said that during the time of Mani, he said, there's absolute evil from this devil urge. Sometimes they didn't always call it Satan. And God is the absolute good. You never see God and the devil sitting down and agreeing on something or compromising. Well, let's see, God, what do you think? No, it's right or it's wrong. It's black and it's white. That had a lot of influence. Now, this minor sect eventually died out, but it's important. Remember our last class, or one of our previous classes on the truth? We talked about the truthometer. Gee, it's a continuum, isn't it? True, false, there's statistical truth, there's all these truths. So we set up this artificial truth, not truth. What about the little white lie? Where does that go on the truth meter? Another major factor in why we can't get along is the media. I would say most media on both sides, equal opportunity, greatly push toward polarization and sensation. Why? It's a news cycle. More people watch. Ratings are up. They're not going to get a rating. So-and-so compromised with so-and-so. That's not a news cycle. You want to get Trump going. You want to get some personal fighting here. You want to, the more action polarized, the better, more ratings. And other stations will pick it up. Culture war. I mentioned this before in one of my other classes. The myth of a polarized America. The North arena. Not related to the political candidate, I don't think. I'm just going to give you one example. Cable. Is abortion murder? Some people say that abortion is an act of murder, while other people disagree with this. What's your view? So 95, 98, and look at people, it's kind of about half and half. I like it. Are you pro-life? No, I'm anti-life. I mean, the way it's framed. You pro-life? No, I'm pro-death. I mean, that's how it's framed. Well, if you ask that question in nuanced form, and you say, what would you do, how do you feel about having an abortion if there's a strong chance of a serious defect in the kid? he's going to come out totally deformed and think, oh, look at it. Most people, 90% go, yeah, okay. What about a woman's health is seriously endangered? Oh, up here. Pregnant as a result of rape. Do you want to carry that rapist kid around in you forever and then have to raise it? Oh, at the other end. You're married, but you don't want more children. When I went to Russia, 5 was the average number of abortions they had in 90. That was their family planning. That was the average. Not married. It's just inconvenient for me to have a kid now. Now it's a little lower. But you see the difference if you ask the questions in different shades, not just black and white. This is in shades of gray. What about religious dominations? We're all taught that, oh, the religions are different. Catholic, Protestant, mainline, evangelical. Look at the lines. They're all about the same. What about political parties on abortion? Democrats, Republicans, Independents. Look at the curves. The media has buffooned us. Here's a nice picture of the 2000 political election. Take a look at that. Where did we get this? Red states and blue states. And you look at that and go, okay. But if you do it by counties, this is what the counties look like. A little more difficult drawing boundaries there, isn't it? And for information, as we talked earlier, if you find yourself in a county that has a Whole Foods store, so I just go on the map and I say, let's see, does this county have a Whole Foods store right there? And how do the people in that county vote? I'll be 90% right that they voted for Obama because they have a Whole Foods store in there. If I pick a county and say, that county in Texas, they have a Cracker Barrel. Got a Cracker Barrel. No. I'm going to ask you the question, I want to think of both, but you get the point. There's a 62% chance that they voted for McCain. So, what's more accurate? The blue state, red state? No, what's more accurate is what kind of food place you got. Because who's going to go there are these people and these people. Isn't that interesting? Okay, same election results. Very close election. The election was really close. How can you spin it? Closely, very deeply divided. You got all these Democrats up here and all these Republicans up here. Very few people in between. That's why it was close, equal. Oh, but if you look at this curve, close election, but not deeply divided. You had these Democrats, Republicans, but all these moderates, everybody voted in between. So it was still a close election. So, same outcome, totally different spin. And how the media presents this and how political parties spin this, I mean, that's major difference. Conclusions. What have we learned? But more importantly, how can we apply it? So, what did your homework show? Well, this is kind of how you came out on the people that turned in their cards. How many of what's that you said that you were? Only about 20% of people's current religion was the same as that of their family upbringing. Well, you showed the data that I told you, right? I told you that isn't the main determiner of what you are. And you kind of were representative of that. Many of the non-religion commented on their strong spirituality, not just believing in an organized church. There was a lot of nuanced answers in the people that said none. Or even among some of the church goers, there's a wide variety in that. It's not homogeneous. And I'm still going to go over more data on your answers on the back, which is the life experiences that help turn you into those. But I want to get this done for today, so I thought that was more important. The Moral Foundation Questionnaire. Remember that? You did the first time. Compared to the average politically moderate Americans, liberals generally score a bit higher on harm and fairness, and much lower on the other three foundations. Conservatives generally show the opposite pattern. I don't know about you, but I need a picture. Okay, so here, very liberal, slightly liberal, moderate, slightly conservative. We didn't have anybody out here on the very conservative. We're going to have to drag some in, Joanne. Get closer up to make, And again, how important it was. Again, look at you liberal folks down here. Fairness and harm, that's what you look at most. And when you get out here, if you're moderate, some both, and when you get up here to the conservative, you can get all of them mixing. But we didn't have anybody to go out on the end there. Now, this was the graph that he had. Kind of looks the same. Now, the scale is a little different, but you see where they start and where they go. So I think that's pretty good, confirmatory that your group, yes, you didn't have the ends, but you still went the same way. This was done by a college student that put all this together and crunched numbers. And this compares you, the average Grinnell in this class, to the average American, which I don't know what that is. So, here's the average Grinnell in the bucket class. You guys are a little more sensitive on all these things. The harm, fairness, loyalty. So you're really a little touching higher than everybody else. But I love it. Look at the inflection points here. They mirror this population. I didn't make this data up. She just plotted it. Oh, that's kind of impressive. The small sample kind of mirrors the big United States. And remember, he did 130,000 on one of these. Solutions and suggestions. My class on emotional well-being, I posited that the three main factors in depression were not necessarily in order, were biochemical, genetic, how we see ourselves, and our view of the world. I'd like to use that same theme here. Our genes, biochemistry, and human nature. I think we've shown that much of what you believe, your temperament, your religion, and even your politics are neurochemically based, at least in part. You and humans in general are Lacanian by nature. I think most of you will buy that. Hume had it right. Intuitions and emotions come first, strategic reasoning second. You are not as rational as you think. And in fact, the more intelligent degrees you have, the better equipped you are just to see and reinforce what you already believe. Sorry, folks. There's a host of cognitive biases and traps that distort our thinking. We've all been shaped by both genetic and cultural evolution to be groupish, no matter how much you want or need to deny it. Oh, no, I'm not subject to any of that psychology. You and I are part selfish chimp and part social bee. We really are homo duplex. Marriage counseling, and politics and religion. When people come in for marriage counseling, it's there and it's okay, so-and-so, what's the problem? He's doing this, he doesn't do this, he doesn't do this, he does that. Okay. This is so-and-so, or sir, what is your problem? She does this, she does this, she doesn't do this, she doesn't do that. No, the finger going at the other person. It's not introspective. How do you view yourself? What filters are you seeing others through in the world? What color glasses do you have on? Which one of those matrices do you have? Remember, to get along, you got to first understand how you're doing. Then we'll worry about the other person. Use the moral matrix paradigm to first see where you are, only then where others might be coming from. Be aware of your emotional and rational blind spots. You're in the car, do you have blind spots? Yeah. Oh, I didn't see that car up to the left of me that I went up there. It's a blind spot. We have emotional blind spots and intellectual blind spots. So if you just look at the liberal moral matrix, these folks are a little heavy on the care, harm, liberty and oppression, fairness, and tapers off the other way. If you're a libertarian, kind of in between, the big deal is liberty and oppression. Everything else, that is the most sacred value, is individual liberty. Everything else is lesser important. So if you're dealing with one of them folks, or you're one of those, let's take a look at it, see where you're at, where you're coming from. If you're a social conservative moral matrix, the most important value is preserve the institutions and traditions that sustain a moral community. These folks are generally a little more equally on there. Isn't that interesting? So when you get these people, the family, and protect this and do this, that's because their lines are a little stronger to that. They see decay of whatever they mean by the family, and authority is to be a problem, potential problem. What filters do you think the others are seeing the world through? Hint, for those of you at the liberal end of the scale, follow the sacredness. It's just like in politics. I want to see what's going on in politics, follow the money. Where's the money? Where's the contributions? Who's the lobbyists? And usually you'll be right. Not always. So for your liberal folks, you want to understand these other folks, or other people, where's the sacredness? So when you watch speeches, you look at political things, and they're just kind of, oh yeah, it's one of the filters, put your sacredness on and say, oh, Carson is tapping into the sacred foundation. Oh, somebody isn't. Hillary's not talking about the sacred foundation. Not at all. Boy, she's going to probably not get a bunch of people or turn off just because of that one thing. It's not that simple. And obviously, the more glasses you can look through, the better you're going to have to appraise the whole situation. Just like in astronomy, I use different filters. They show me different things. If I combine them, I get a better picture than if I just have one filter. Liberals and atheists, what are your blind spots? The atheists, oh, it's all about the beliefs. You religious folks, it's just what they believe. That's what it's all about. It's stupid beliefs. Blind spot is, no, it has something to do with something else about going to church and belonging that isn't about the heaven or hell stuff. You rationalists out there, what have you learned? As philosopher David Hume said a long time ago, and as reasoning is not the source whence either disputant derives his tenets, it's in vain to expect that any logic which speaks not to the affectations, that's his word for emotions, will ever engage him to embrace sounder principles. So Hume said that many hundred years ago. You're trying to convince somebody, Hume says, don't bother doing this on the intellectual level if they have an emotional investment in it. Now, if they don't have an emotional investment in it, then you're okay. But once they do, you better think differently. One of the best books ever written, 1936, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Dale Carnegie. He was a master psychologist. 6 ways to make people like you. Gee, what do 20 people want to do? We all want to be liked. We care how people think of us. The 12 ways to win people to your way of thinking. Oh, what's this class about? The 9 ways to change people without arousing resentment. Let's send this to everybody in Congress, even if it's on their bookshelf, and make them read it. But you still haven't gotten rid of the lobbying and the other stuff. Term elections, federal financing of elections would go a long way. Term limits would go a long way. What's the other person's heuristic style? Remember first to see what your own tendencies are. What do I mean by heuristic styles? Attempting to deal with others with different styles of thinking. I'll zip through this quickly. It's a busy slide, but first attempt to ascertain their style, which I'll tell you what that is in a minute. Second, if they really want a discourse, because they may not want to argue with you. Third, set some objectives and limits. What specific issues are we going to talk about? Religion in general, Christianity, heaven, hell? No, I just want to talk about one type thing. Fourth, your goal may often be not to change their mind, but just to give them your perspective or opinion. But only if asked to do so. Most people don't take advice in this, they ask for it. At least my kids don't. Fifth, ask them where they are on the willingness to change continuum. I'm not even thinking about changing. There ain't no way. I ask people that when they're smoking. I'm not going to waste time talking to them about, well, you shouldn't smoke, it's bad for your health, and do this. I ask them up front, Where are you on this scale? Hey, doc, I smoked for 30 years. I'm going to smoke till I die. Okay, thank you. Why would I waste time trying to convince them? Well, I've been thinking about it every day, and I've tried 5 times, and boy, real close. Oh, now I know where to go. Same thing with other arguments with other people, right? 6, assert that 2 minds are smarter than 1, usually. And what you really want to do is see the issue from their perspective. But you gotta mean it. Can't be this fake. People can see through BS usually, if you're just patronizing them. Lastly, agree to disagree is a possible outcome. We may discuss this, but we may disagree at the end. That's okay. Move toward closure. If either one of you reverts to strong activation of the amygdala or emotional processing, since no rational prefrontal cortex processing is like to occur. So when you see them starting to get a little mad, you say, yeah, maybe it's time to take lunch, or let's change to another topic. Because they've just gone from here to the amygdala. And any of your arguments, I think if you want to hear them, no way. I don't know if it's in there further, but I got to go over it now because I want to make sure I don't miss it. The 120-second rule. So if you're presented with a question to make a decision on, you've heard count to 3 or count to 10. If you do 120 seconds, you do a little differently than if you just give the answer right away. See, you just think about it, and the studies have been done, it changes a little bit. I don't know if the answer is right, and you ponder it. You just think a little more. Things are different. I went to a mindfulness class a couple months ago, and they said the same thing for emotions. So you're having an argument with somebody, and you do something, they're upset. Put your watch on for 120 seconds. After 120 seconds, oh, okay, you ran into me, but that's okay, we'll let the insurance take care of it. Emotions go down. If it's longer than 120 seconds, they're bringing baggage up from the past and dumping it onto this. It's not just about this. Well, Jiro, why are you so upset? I just, let the cat do this, and gee, it's no big deal. But it goes on and goes on. It's not just about that if it's more than 120 seconds. They're bringing all in, and if you let, that will come up. Well, I thought that's a little interesting tip to know about people. It's okay to come to no conclusion or admit you were wrong. Boy, that's pretty tough for us to do. Got that wrong. Finally, some issues are too big to handle in simple solution. Global warming, many questions. You're not going to have that over a 40-minute lunch. Scientists, everybody else can't even agree on that. Heuristic style. Okay, somebody comes in, vaccinations. They're in one of these paradigms. If I can figure this out, I'm not going to waste my time or spin my wheels. So if they're fear-based, I heard vaccines are harmful, and I'm not going to get them. Bandwagging. If others are refusing it, there must be something to it. All these other brothers are not doing it. Oh. Analytical. I want to see the data so I can make a decision. Enumerate. Can't understand difficulty manipulating numbers. 1 in a million, that sounds awful high. Boy, I'd be the 1 in a million that has a side effect. I don't want my kid to get the vaccine. Denials. I don't care what the data show. I don't believe the vaccine's safe. So if you got one of these figured out right away, here are your approach to them. And it's different for every thinking process the other person has, right? I mean, you're here, they're there, and you wonder why you're not making any progress. Well, find out where they're at, and you got a little better chance of addressing their issues. Consider the source. What I mean by that is, I was going to read out a whole bunch of, about half dozen things here. I was going to read something by Mussolini, something by Jesus, something by Rush Limbaugh, and other people, and I was going to have you to tell me who did it, but I was going to tell you who it was. And you would have gotten every single one of those wrong. Because I got every one of them wrong. Not that I'm smarter than you, but, whoa, Jesus in heaven, whoa. See? So, but once you hear that, and you mention Trump, or Limbaugh, or Jesus, you've already done the affective, you've already, see what I'm saying? Your brain's already going that way, or it's going that way. So if you just read it, I do that in the office. I like to look at x-rays. I don't like to look at the report. I want to see what I think. Because once I look at the report, oh, there's a fracture there. I see that because he said it. But if I look at it, I go, I see that. But I might see another fracture that the radiologist didn't see. See, because I just want to see the thing that I was talked about. Remember, you're all weird in here. That's important to know. Be included. You see things from a weird perspective. Wear someone else's glasses and walk in their shoes. Henry Ford, a contemporary of Carnegie, best expressed this when he said, if there's any one secret of success, it lies in the ability to get the other person's point of view and see things from their angle as well as your own. If you really want to change someone's mind on a moral or political issue, you need to see it from his or her angle as well as your own. Empathy is an antidote to righteousness, as difficult as that may be. Jonathan 8. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. Habit 5, seek first to understand, then to be understood. Don't we usually just bide our time? If we do, let the other person go, oh, you can go first, just patiently. Till it's our turn, then we'll tell them what's right answer. Or we'll show them what's wrong with their thinking. Are we really good listeners? Do we try to intellectually bully them or press them with their knowledge or degrees? Don't we already know that they are wrong? Habit 6, synergize. Synergy means that the end result is greater than the sum of its parts. Mutual solution is better than either one of you could have come up with on your own. Others contribute a piece of view of reality that you don't have received. Example, perhaps you're left-brained and they're right-brained. Won't your points of view be complementary? Levels of communication. As one moves from win-lose or lose-win paradigm to respectful compromise to this higher level, 2 additional events occur. Besides a better solution, the interaction itself can produce greater trust and cooperation. Besides, you both together are probably closer to the truth, whatever that means. Maybe that requires you to change your mind, and maybe that's actually a good thing. Practical tips. Take a little to lunch. Or the opposite. But agree not to talk about politics or the religion, the issue. Just build some trust. Talk about the Packers or the Hawkeyes. Just bond together a little bit. Hopefully it gains some genuine empathy as a person. Newt in the 1995 Congress, when Newt came in and all those new Republicans, he told all the new guys that came in, says, don't you guys move to Washington. You stay back in your home districts. Don't come to Washington. Just come here on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, which is all they work, by the way. And then go home. Okay. In the old days, they all stayed in Washington. So you're Democrat, I'm Republican, we might go to the same restaurant. Our kids may be on the same volleyball team. So we fight in Congress, but our kids are playing soccer together. We're going out together. Chip O'Neill could have a drink with somebody on the other side of the aisle. Now, you come into Congress, you go right into the gladiator bin, and you go back up. Where are you going to have this basis for trust and cooperation? So that's just a little side of what I'm getting at here, and one of the reasons I think it's a little dysfunctional in Washington. Remember this. Can I, or they, believe, or must I, or they believe? How you phrase that question is pretty important. You go to a restaurant, you must eat that. Or you can try that. A little different approach. Why we need others to help us reason better. We've already seen how biased, emotional, myopic, and egocentric our own reasoning, if done in isolation, is. Exploratory versus confirmatory thought. How to increase accountability. So, okay, I really want to come up with a moral question, or I really want to come up with a good answer. There's only 3 conditions that are going to make that apply. Then I'm not going to self-BS myself. So I'll come up with the answer I want, that I like, that I've had because of all these biases. But If the decision maker learns before forming an opinion that they'll be accountable to an audience, like I'm going to have to be accountable to you, and I don't know what your views are. I don't know if you're religious or not, or Democrat or a Republican. And I believe that you're well informed, which you are, and interested in accuracy. I'm going to really float a little better, work toward the truth, aren't I? So I'm really going to be more likely to do exploratory, come up with something, because you're going to challenge me. I care what you think. That idiot Paulson, that's just what he wants to believe. He's just said that all the time because he's a blah, 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 blah. Oh, you guys are going to be really critical of me. And I'm going, I want to know how you think. So if you set this up, people are pretty good. They don't just fly off the cuff on stuff. Of course, in Washington, you know what the other people are. I mean, so this is like a not real world. Why is this true? People are trying harder to look right than be right. Just tell me. Now, we did this model before. Here's the event. You have your intuition. That's wrong. You shouldn't do that. But the intuition is, so that's a judgment. That's wrong. Shouldn't do that. But it came from my gut. It was a fast, rapid thing. That's not right. You shouldn't do that to your kids. Shouldn't spank your kids. And then, well, you shouldn't spank your kids because if you do, you'll just reinforce them that violence is bad and yeah. Okay? But if you bring somebody else in, now you got their intuition. Well, I don't know. Maybe beating kids once in a while, spanking in time is okay. And boy, our schools are getting pretty wild out there. So their judgment, maybe it's okay. And then they have their reasoning. So there's some arrows that come back here. So, again, the point here is if you get some feedback from some other people, you're not in your little closed emotional loop is likely. The paradigm shift. Remember our beautiful lady and our ugly lady. Every time brings the people, you usually have your first thing, and then later when you've done this, you find the other one. But most of us needed some help. I've done some of these where I couldn't figure it. I stared at it for half an hour and I had to turn the page and the guy says, oh yeah, and look up there, gives me the hint. My brain can't click in to see that other thing. Sometimes we need somebody else to point out, oh, there's the feather in her hand. Oh, there's her lip down there, the ugly woman. I just didn't see, oh, now that you show me that's her lip, I got it. So sometimes we need other people to bring us into reality and see that the world can be viewed differently. Because one's an ugly woman, and one's a beautiful woman. But they're the same woman, because it's the same picture. So how many things out there in the world have this good-evil Manichaean dualism to them? The worldview. Obviously, the wider our worldview, the more accurate our assessment will be. Hints. Visitors stay in a culture or country, not your own. Not as a tourist. Stay with the people. Join the Peace Corps. Encourage your kids to take advantage of overseas studies. Read books outside your comfort zone, written or said in other times or cultures. Identify your worldview before trying to identify the other person's. Is the ethics of autonomy, is it the ethics of community or the ethics of divinity? Or is it a hybrid? For you, and then for others. A very important part of a worldview is the vision and function of society. Is your view Durkheimian or Millian? Now, is it John Stuart Mill, the individual, and if I don't do anything that bothers you, that's okay. Laws and governments and societies are only to allow people to do everything that all you individuals want. Or it's Durkheimian, no, we're kind of a big social unit here, and that's the way you should look at it. How to best protect and nurture the hive. In my opinion, a balanced approach is the best for both the bees and the hive. Therefore, the question, who's correct, the left or the right, is misphrased. We need both. From the beginnings of society, there's always been and will continue to be a tension between those who want to preserve the status quo and those who wish to change it. By the way, where do the words left and right come from? Anybody know? French Revolution. Having the French parliaments there, and they're just before the Revolution. The people for change are on the left. The people we're not changing are on the right. That's where the derivation of right and left came. So you're for change, or radical change, or no, we're keeping things the way they are. Bertrand Russell saw this dynamic throughout Western intellectual history. From 600 BC to the present day, philosophers have been divided into those who wish to tighten social bonds and those who wish to relax them. It's clear that each party to this dispute is partly right and partly wrong. Strengths and weaknesses. The liberals are right in that unrestrained capitalism can be harmful to both individuals and eventually the society in general. That's true. However, liberals are wrong as they fail to appreciate the bonding and glue of society that the foundations of tradition, authority, and sanctity provide. So both folks have their blind spots. What's the implication for corporations? What can we learn? Think about Toyota, the things they did that we didn't do. Communism, why did it fail? These are all topics. Didn't take into human nature. Utopias. And remember the ones that had everybody follow more rules and the ones that didn't? It didn't make any difference. It's whether they sacralized them. Countries. Or even personal relationships, etc. What can we learn from thinking outside our Judeo-Christian weird culture? Different political structures, Confucianism, all that interaction of the family, business strategies, debbing in the auto industry, different religious approaches, Buddhism and Taoism. Very different. You have the Western religions, authoritarian, this is what you do, right, wrong. Eastern religions, very different. Non-Manichaean value systems, yin and yang. So I like this. It's in the I Ching. So they say, yeah, okay, there's light and bright, strong, assertive, male, positive, heaven. And then you have the opposites. But they're not opposite. One's here and one's over here. They touch borders. They interact. And, gee, there's some of the other in the center. So even this is male, there's some female inside us males. There is some male inside the females. You see? So if you look at this, it's a totally different than the black and white. The Chinese philosophy of yin and yang describes how opposites or contrary forces are actually complementary, interconnected, and dependent upon each other. Yin and yang can be thought of as complementary rather than opposing forces that interact to form a dynamic, moving system in which the whole is greater than the assembled parts. Gee, what if we use that in politics or religion? Chinese have been doing this for thousands of years. Maybe that's why their society in the Song Dynasty did so well. And finally, what are the war between science and religion? It's only a war if you frame it as such. In fact, just like politics, we need both. The sphere of gods and spirits in our early world. We talked about gods, pantheism, animism, and people saw anagenicity and patterns in the world and tried to make something cause those to understand the world. And most of intellectual science people say, yeah, this is what's going on. Science is taking over religion, and as more and more science is learned, religion, think what it was like before. We know what causes lightning. Okay, the sphere moves over a little more. We know what causes this, move a little more. We know evolution. And so science is basically going to squish religion out, right? Wrong. It's the model you use it. However, they are and should be seen as not only different, but complementary and even necessary. I want to stress that word necessary. So, they deal with different things. The moral questions, the shoulds. That's purview of religious values. Scientific method, the physical truths. Einstein, the content of scientific theory itself offers no moral foundation for the personal conduct of life. The most brilliant mind we have says, no, it doesn't tell me about my moral sphere. So finally, we have to come to the end of the class, and doing so, hopefully answered some of our original questions. So, Rodney King, remember this? That's where we all started. How is our race capable of this? How can a race of Homo sapiens do this or image this? This is one of man's greatest triumphs, and I'll tell you why. Think about that picture. Think of a group of apes, chimpanzees in Africa designing a drone. And the drone is going to go to another part of the country to look for bananas. Okay, delayed gratification. Well, it don't happen with chimps over millions of years of evolution. They can't even get together to carry a log. So here are human beings getting together on a project that's going to take how many years? 9 years. So my delayed gratification, we're going to take a picture 9 years from now, 3 billion miles away. And there are, how many things have to happen for that to go right? How many people have to forget their political, turf, tribal stuff, all the stuff that we've talked about? They have to bind together. They can't say, well, I think we should go this way. Well, I don't think we should go that way. Now, you missed a little bit. After 3 billion miles, your trajectory, you're screwed. You know, I mean, so science is not like, well, I think we do this. So the fact that our species could do that, I think that's one of the greatest things. Going on the moon, yeah, that was great. You can see the moon up there. Spaceship was like, you could drive and see it. Oh, there it is, right up there. You're shooting at a moving target 3 billion miles away? That's unbelievable. So we have this tremendous potential to bond together, to make accomplishments, and whatever we decide to do, we could probably do. So I'd like to close with a quote from the philosopher Isaiah Berlin. I came to the conclusion that there is a plurality of ideals, as there is a plurality of cultures and of temperaments. And the difference this makes is that if a man pursues one of the values, I, who do not, am able to understand why he pursues it, or what it would be like, in his circumstances, for me to be induced to pursue it. Hence the possibility of human understanding. So I think this is what the class is all about. Just thinking what it would be like in their shoes, from their perspective, and I think that's where the hope lies. And we can all use a bit of more understanding. So we are a Homo duplex, and that is the end. So thank you.
I think we need to send him to
Congress. Don't you think you should go to Congress and give them a I, of course, have made a card, and we, of course, have all signed it in gratitude for making us think in new, different, wonderful ways. Boxing gloves, praying hands. Why can't we just all get along? It says, are we going to box or are we going to get along? And of course, I've taken the liberty to write a poem. I think, therefore, we have this doctor in our town who helps us with our ills. He takes our temps and pokes about and maybe gives us pills. But now of late he has the nerve to poke into our brain and show us that our brains have ills that also causes pain. He wonders why the human race can't seem to get along. We fight and growl and cuss and scowl all day and all night long. I said, I hoped he had a cure, but no. He said, not so. There are some things we must endure as far as I now know. Keep looking, Doc, for a magic pill. Keep looking just in case you find a pill that puts a smile on the face of the human race. Wonderful.
Oxytocin would be it.
Yes. Thank you for coming. We'll see all of you next week. Bye-bye.